The NFL's free agency period is often a time of hope and excitement as teams scramble to sign the players they believe will be the missing piece to a championship puzzle. But while some free agent acquisitions go on to become franchise-defining moves, others end in disaster, leaving fans and organizations alike questioning what went wrong. From overpriced contracts to underwhelming performances, terrible free agent signings have a way of haunting teams for years. In this video, we'll explore some of the worst free agent signings in NFL history, analyzing what made them such costly mistakes and how they impacted the teams that took the gamble. Chuck Smith's tenure with the Carolina Panthers is a tale of high hopes, a hefty paycheck, and one of the most anticlimactic free agent signings in NFL history. Back in 2000, Smith was coming off a stellar career with the Atlanta Falcons, where he had cemented himself as one of the league's premier pass rushers. Over 9 seasons, he terrorized quarterbacks, racking up 58.5 sacks, and becoming a cornerstone of Atlanta's defense. The Panthers, eager to bolster their defensive line and add some veteran star power, pounced on the opportunity to sign him, offering a jaw-dropping 5-year, $21 million contract complete with a $4.5 million signing bonus. It seemed like the perfect match, a proven sack machine joining a team hungry for defensive dominance. But instead of sacks and glory, the Panthers got 2 games. Yes, just 2 games. The story of Chuck Smith's time in Carolina can be summarized as the ultimate bait and switch. Panthers fans were understandably giddy when Smith joined the team, envisioning a wrecking ball of a pass rusher wreaking havoc on the NFC. And for 2 brief games in 2000, it seemed like their dreams might come true, but then came the dreaded knee injury, the kind of twist that felt more fitting for a soap opera than a football field. Smith's knee problems weren't just a minor setback, they were a career killer. By week 3, he was sidelined for surgery, and by the end of the season, it was painfully clear that Smith's days as a Panther and as an NFL player were over. Just like that, the $4.5 million signing bonus became one of the most expensive tickets to the bench in league history. Smith's signing didn't just hurt on the field, it was a gut punch to the Panthers' plans for the future. With so much cap space tied up in Smith's contract, the team couldn't make the other moves needed to fill the void he left. It was like spending your entire paycheck on a sports car that breaks down as soon as you drive it off the lot. For a franchise still finding its footing in the NFL, Smith's signing became a cautionary tale about the perils of free agency. Instead of anchoring a defense and mentoring younger players, Smith's most memorable contribution to the Panthers was becoming a what not to do example for general managers. The real tragedy of the Chuck Smith saga is how quickly the narrative shifted. When he signed, he was seen as a game changer, the kind of player who could redefine Carolina's defense. By the end of the 2000 season, his name had become synonymous with disappointment. Smith's body betrayed him, and the Panthers were left holding the bag, a very expensive, very empty bag. And to make matters worse, his failure to live up to expectations left a gaping hole in the defense that haunted the team for years to come. Jeff Garcia's short-lived stint with the Cleveland Browns is a classic example of how even a seemingly smart free agent signing can go hilariously painfully wrong. In 2004, the Browns were desperate for stability at quarterback, a position that had been a revolving door of mediocrity since the team's rebirth in 1999. Enter Jeff Garcia, a 3-time Pro Bowler who had thrived with the San Francisco 49ers, leading them to playoff appearances and putting up solid numbers along the way. He seemed like the perfect solution to Cleveland's quarterback woes, a veteran with experience, mobility, and a proven track record. So the Browns handed him a hefty 4-year, $25 million contract with high hopes that he could finally end their quarterback misery. Spoiler alert, he didn't. Garcia's tenure in Cleveland started rocky and went downhill faster than a Browns fan's optimism in late October. The problem wasn't just the Browns' typically porous offensive line or the lack of weapons around him, although those didn't help. It was Garcia's complete inability to mesh with the team's system or its coaching staff. From the very start, it was clear that Garcia and head coach Butch Davis weren't on the same page. Garcia struggled in the pocket, looked uncomfortable in the Browns' offense, and often resorted to scrambling for his life, which usually ended in a sack or a prayer of a pass. The low point of Garcia's season, and arguably his entire career, came in a humiliating 58-48 loss to the Cincinnati Bengals in what became known as the Shootout of Sadness. While Garcia threw for over 300 yards in that game, the Browns' offense was a disjointed mess, and the team's defense collapsed entirely. The Browns' season spiraled out of control, and Garcia's erratic play only added to the dysfunction. By the time the season ended, Garcia had thrown for a meager 10 touchdowns against 9 interceptions, completing just 57.1% of his passes. He was benched late in the year for rookie Luke McCown, a move that felt less like a strategy and more like throwing in the towel. What really makes Garcia's time in Cleveland memorable, though, is how quickly the relationship between him and the Browns soured. As the losses piled up, Garcia became openly frustrated, criticizing the coaching staff and the offensive system. Meanwhile, Browns fans, already some of the most tortured in the NFL, turned their ire on Garcia, who they had once hoped would be the savior of their franchise. After just one disastrous season, the Browns cut their losses and released him, ending one of the most forgettable free agent signings in team history. Looking back, the Jeff Garcia experiment was doomed from the start. Cleveland's offensive line couldn't protect him, the coaching staff didn't know how to use him, and Garcia himself seemed increasingly disinterested as the season wore on. What was supposed to be a fresh start for both Garcia and the Browns turned into yet another chapter in Cleveland's infamous quarterback carousel. For Browns fans, the Garcia signing became yet another punchline in their never-ending saga of quarterback futility. And for Garcia, it was a detour he likely wished he could forget. Dale Carter's stint with the Denver Broncos is a textbook example of how a high-profile free agent signing can turn into an absolute disaster. In 1999, the Broncos, fresh off back-to-back Super Bowl championships, were looking to bolster their secondary after the retirement of cornerback Darian Gordon. Dale Carter, a 4-time Pro Bowler with the Kansas City Chiefs, seemed like the perfect fit. Known for his athleticism, physicality, and ability to shut down top receivers, Carter had built a reputation as one of the league's elite cornerbacks. The Broncos believed he was the missing piece to solidify their defense and gave him a massive 4-year, $22.8 million contract, including a $7.8 million signing bonus. What they got in return, however, was one of the worst free agent flops in NFL history. Carter's tenure in Denver began with immediate red flags. Despite his on-field talent, Carter brought significant off-field baggage, including issues with substance abuse and a growing rap sheet of NFL suspensions. Shortly after signing with the Broncos, Carter's troubles escalated. In August 1999, he was suspended for the entire season after violating the league's substance abuse policy. The Broncos, who had invested heavily in Carter to anchor their defense, suddenly found themselves paying a fortune for a player who wasn't even eligible to step onto the field. When Carter finally debuted for Denver in the 2000 season, it was clear he was not the same player who had dominated in Kansas City. The long layoff, combined with age and lingering off-field distractions, left him a shell of his former self. His play on the field was inconsistent at best, with blown coverages and missed tackles becoming more frequent than the lockdown performances the Broncos had hoped for. Carter's stint in Denver was also marred by poor chemistry with teammates and coaching staff, further adding to the dysfunction. By the end of the 2000 season, Carter's value to the team had evaporated, and the Broncos were saddled with one of the worst contracts in franchise history. After just one underwhelming season, the Broncos released him, cutting their losses and moving on from a player who had become more of a liability than an asset. The $7.8 million signing bonus became a painful reminder of what could go wrong when a team gambles big on a player with significant risk factors. David Boston's signing with the San Diego Chargers in 2003 is a classic case of a big-name free agent acquisition gone disastrously wrong. At the time, Boston was one of the most physically imposing wide receivers in the NFL. Standing 6'2" and weighing around 240 pounds, he was a rare blend of size, speed, and power. Boston had just come off a stellar season with the Arizona Cardinals in 2001, where he racked up 1,600 receiving yards and earned a Pro Bowl selection. The Chargers, desperate for a dynamic weapon to support their young quarterback Drew Brees, signed Boston to a massive 7-year, $47 million contract, including a $12 million signing bonus. Unfortunately for San Diego, the move would prove to be a nightmare. Boston's time with the Chargers got off to a rocky start as issues with injuries, work ethic, and attitude quickly overshadowed his on-field potential. Although he managed to record 880 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns in his first season with the team, it was far from the production expected of a receiver earning one of the richest contracts in the league at the time. His flashes of brilliance were were often overshadowed by his inability to stay healthy and his growing reputation as a locker room headache. One of the key issues with Boston was his obsession with bodybuilding and his extreme training regimen, which many believed hindered his flexibility and contributed to his frequent injuries. While his chiseled physique was awe-inspiring, it didn't translate to consistent performance on the field. Instead, it seemed to exacerbate his struggles to stay in peak playing condition. Off the field, Boston's attitude and behavior created significant friction with teammates and coaches. Known for his erratic personality, he clashed with head coach Marty Schottenheimer, whose disciplined team-first approach didn't mesh with Boston's more self-centered mindset. The boiling point came during the 2004 offseason when Boston was involved in a heated altercation with the Chargers' strength coach. The incident further soured his relationship with the organization, which had already grown frustrated with his lack of production and off-field antics. Just 1 year after signing him to a massive contract, the Chargers decided they'd had enough. Boston was traded to the Miami Dolphins for a measly 6th-round draft pick and a player to be named later, effectively ending one of the worst free agent experiments in franchise history. Larry Brown's signing with the Oakland Raiders in 1996 is a prime example of how free agency can lead to costly missteps when teams overvalue postseason heroics. Brown, a cornerback for the Dallas Cowboys, became a household name after his standout performance in Super Bowl 30, where he recorded 2 game-changing interceptions and was named the game's MVP. Riding the wave of his Super Bowl fame, Brown entered free agency as one of the most sought-after defensive players on the market. The Raiders, always eager for a splashy acquisition, offered him a lucrative 5-year, $12.5 million contract with a $3.5 million signing bonus. Unfortunately, Brown's stint in Oakland was a disaster almost from the start. Brown's Super Bowl MVP title obscured the reality of his career. While he had been a solid player for the Cowboys, he was never considered an elite cornerback. His Super Bowl interceptions, while impressive, were largely the result of errant throws by Steelers quarterback Neil O'Donnell rather than extraordinary coverage skills. The Raiders, however, overlooked these nuances and paid him as if he were one of the top corners in the league. Once in Oakland, Brown's limitations became glaringly obvious. Expected to be a shutdown corner, he struggled mightily in coverage, often getting burned by opposing receivers. He lacked the speed and agility to keep up with the NFL's elite pass catchers, and his instincts, which had served him well in Dallas's zone-heavy scheme, didn't translate to Oakland's defensive system. Injuries only compounded the problem, as Brown appeared in just 12 games over 2 seasons, starting only 1. For a player brought in to be a cornerstone of the defense, his inability to stay on the field or contribute meaningfully was a significant disappointment. By 1998, the Raiders had seen enough. After 2 unproductive seasons, they released Brown, cutting their losses on what had become one of the most regrettable signings in franchise history. The move not only cost them millions of dollars, but also highlighted the dangers of overpaying based on a player's postseason performance rather than their overall body of work. Larry Brown's time in Oakland has become an example for teams chasing free agents. His signing underscores the risks of getting swept up in the hype surrounding a player's big game heroics without fully evaluating their long-term consistency and fit within the team's scheme. For the Raiders, it was a harsh lesson in free agency, a deal that left them with buyer's remorse and reinforced the importance of substance over spectacle. To this day, Brown's signing is remembered as one of the Raiders' most infamous free agent flops. Adam Archuleta's signing with the Washington Redskins in 2006 is a glaring example of how big money free agent deals can go awry. Archuleta, a safety who had spent his first 5 seasons with the Saints. Louis Rams was known for his physical style of play and his ability to deliver punishing hits in the box. While he wasn't considered a top-tier cover safety, his reputation as a hard-nosed defender and reliable tackler made him a hot commodity in free agency. The Redskins, eager to bolster their secondary, offered him a massive 6-year, $30 million contract with $10 million guaranteed, making him the highest-paid safety in NFL history at the time. Unfortunately for Washington, the investment quickly turned into one of the most infamous free agent busts in league history. From the start, it was clear that Archuleta was not a fit for Washington's defensive scheme under coordinator Greg Williams. The system demanded versatility from its safeties, with a strong emphasis on pass coverage and adaptability. Archuleta's skill set, however, was tailored more toward playing close to the line of scrimmage, acting almost like a hybrid linebacker. When asked to cover tight ends or drop back into zone coverage, his weaknesses were glaring. Opposing quarterbacks quickly exploited his inability to keep pace with receivers, and Archuleta found himself repeatedly out of position in crucial moments. The Redskins coaching staff, recognizing the mismatch, began to reduce Archuleta's role as the season progressed. By mid-season, the league's highest-paid safety had been relegated to special teams, a humiliating demotion that underscored just how poorly the signing had gone. Archuleta played in all 16 games during the 2006 season, but started only 7, finishing with just 60 tackles and 0 interceptions. For a player expected to transform the defense, his contributions were minimal, and his limitations became a liability for the team. The fallout from the Archuleta signing was swift and brutal. After just 1 season, the Redskins decided to cut their losses, trading him to the Chicago Bears for a 6th-round draft pick, a steep fall in value for a player they had signed to a record-setting deal less than a year earlier. The trade effectively ended Archuleta's time as a starting-caliber safety, and he was out of the league by 2008. For the Redskins, the Archuleta debacle became a symbol of the team's reckless spending habits during the Dan Snyder era, where splashy free agent signings often took precedence over sound roster-building strategies. The move was a stark reminder of the importance of evaluating scheme fit and player compatibility before committing significant resources to a free agent. In hindsight, Archuleta's time in Washington is remembered as one of the worst signings in NFL history, a costly mistake that provided little return on investment and served as a cautionary tale for teams looking to make big moves in free agency. DeMarco Murray's signing with the Philadelphia Eagles in 2015 is a prime example of how a blockbuster free agent deal can unravel spectacularly when a player is miscast in a system that doesn't suit their strengths. Coming off a historic 2014 season with the Dallas Cowboys, where he led the NFL with 1,800 rushing yards and 13 touchdowns, Murray was considered one of the top running backs in the league. The Eagles, eager to replace the recently traded LaShawn McCoy, signed Murray to a 5-year, $40 million contract with $21 million guaranteed. On paper, it seemed like a perfect fit. Murray was a proven workhorse and the centerpiece of the Cowboys' offense. In reality, it was a disaster. The problems began with the offensive philosophy of Eagles head coach Chip Kelly. Kelly's up-tempo spread system relied heavily on lateral movement and quickness, favoring backs who could excel in space and make sharp cuts. Murray, however, thrived in Dallas behind a powerful offensive line that created downhill running lanes, allowing him to build momentum and punish defenders with his physical style. In Philadelphia, Murray was often forced to run out of shotgun formations, limiting his ability to use his vision and power effectively. Instead of thriving, Murray looked hesitant and slow in Kelly's scheme, struggling to replicate the success he had enjoyed in Dallas. The results on the field were stark. Murray rushed for just 702 yards and 6 touchdowns in 2015, averaging a paltry 3.6 yards per carry, nearly 2 full yards less than his 2014 average. His struggles culminated in a Week 13 game against the New England Patriots, where he played a mere 14 snaps and rushed for only 24 yards, sparking rumors of discord between Murray and the coaching staff. Reports surfaced that Murray had voiced frustrations to Eagles owner Jeffrey Lurie, further straining the already tenuous relationship between player and team. Off the field, Murray's signing also became a symbol of the chaotic personnel decisions made during Chip Kelly's tenure as head coach and de facto general manager. Kelly's aggressive moves, including trading away franchise stalwarts like McCoy and adding Murray and Ryan Matthews, failed to produce results. The Eagles finished the season 7-9, and Kelly was fired before the year even ended. The Eagles cut ties with Murray after just 1 season, trading him to the Tennessee Titans in March 2016 in a salary dump move. Murray's brief tenure in Philadelphia is now remembered as one of the most disappointing free agent acquisitions in franchise history. While Murray went on to rejuvenate his career with the Titans, his time in Philadelphia underscored the importance of scheme fit in the NFL. Even the most talented players can struggle if placed in a system that doesn't align with their skills. And for the Eagles, Murray's signing became a costly lesson in what happens when marquee talent is misused. Greg Jennings' signing with the Minnesota Vikings in 2013 is a classic example of how a high-profile free agent acquisition can fail to live up to expectations. After 7 successful seasons with the Green Bay Packers, Jennings left as a 2-time Pro Bowler and a Super Bowl champion. Known for his precise route running, reliable hands, and knack for big plays, Jennings had been one of Aaron Rodgers' most trusted targets. When the Vikings signed him to a 5-year, $47.5 million contract, including $18 million guaranteed, they believed they were getting a proven star who could bring stability to their passing game and help elevate their offense. Unfortunately for Minnesota, the move fell far short of those expectations. The biggest issue with Jennings' stint in Minnesota wasn't his talent, it was the lack of a reliable quarterback to maximize his skills. In Green Bay, Jennings thrived with elite quarterbacks like Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball. In Minnesota, however, he had to work with a revolving door of quarterbacks, including Christian Ponder, Matt Cassell, and an aging Josh Freeman. None of them had the accuracy, decision-making, or chemistry with Jennings to replicate the kind of success he had experienced in Green Bay. As a result, Jennings' production took a significant hit. In his first season with the Vikings, he recorded just 68 catches for 804 yards and 4 touchdowns. Not terrible numbers, but far below what was expected of a receiver earning nearly $10 million a year. The frustrations continued into his second season in 2014. While rookie quarterback Teddy Bridgewater showed promise, the Vikings' offense was still inconsistent and Jennings struggled to establish himself as the go-to target he was brought in to be. He finished the season with 59 receptions for 742 yards and 6 touchdowns. Decent stats, but not nearly enough to justify his hefty contract. By the end of the 2014 season, it was clear that Jennings was no longer the dynamic playmaker the Vikings had hoped for, and his role in the offense was diminishing. Off the field, Jennings' time in Minnesota was marked by some questionable comments that didn't sit well with fans. Shortly after signing with the Vikings, Jennings took public jabs at his former quarterback Aaron Rodgers, accusing him of being selfish and overly controlling. These remarks alienated some of Jennings' supporters in Green Bay and didn't do much to endear him to his new team's fan base. While Jennings later walked back some of his comments, the damage had been done, and his remarks became an unnecessary distraction. In March 2015, after just 2 seasons, the Vikings released Jennings to free up salary cap space. His brief tenure in Minnesota was ultimately underwhelming, leaving fans and analysts questioning whether the signing had ever made sense in the first place. While Jennings still had some gas left in the tank, he played one more season with the Miami Dolphins. His time with the Vikings is remembered as a disappointment. The Greg Jennings signing serves as a reminder that even established stars can struggle in new environments, especially when paired with subpar supporting casts. For the Vikings, it was an expensive gamble that didn't pay off, and for Jennings, it marked the beginning of the decline of what had once been a stellar career. These failed signings underscore the challenges of free agency. Talent alone isn't enough to guarantee success. Factors like scheme fit, locker room dynamics, and organizational stability all play crucial roles in determining whether a free agent acquisition will thrive or flop. The hefty contracts and high stakes of these deals mean that when they fail, the consequences ripple across the franchise, affecting cap space, roster construction, and even team morale. As NFL teams continue to chase the promise of free agent saviors each offseason, the lessons of these missteps remain relevant. The stories of these players remind us that for every signing that becomes a franchise cornerstone, there's another that turns into an expensive regret. In the end, these cautionary tales are a testament to the fact that in the NFL, no move is ever a sure thing, and that sometimes the biggest moves come with the biggest risks. If you enjoyed the video, then I would really appreciate you taking a second to press the like button and subscribe, because we are trying to hit 10,000 subscribers this year.